Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Guilty Gear's newest character, which is Bedman. Now, obviously the character just came out, so I'm going to be talking about initial impressions of the character. And I think that's important to note with this character in particular because they're a very weird type of character where it can be a little bit harder to really assess how good the character is going to be. Ultimately, I think this is going to be a character that is very matchup dependent, and there's going to be a lot of things that we had to figure out with the character to really see how strong they are. But I figured we could talk about just initial impressions of the character, what I think they do well and what I think they maybe don't do so well. So to start us off, the first thing that I think is pretty good about this character is that they have, for the most part, pretty good normals, specifically in regards to the hitboxes and the range that they have. Their far slash is pretty good, their 2S is very big, their 2D is also very big. They just have great range on their normals, and there's also a good amount of disjoint to their normals as well. So if we take a look over on Dustloop, you can see their far slash has a bit of disjoint, their 5H has a lot of disjoint to it. Even things like their 5K has disjoint. So I think a lot of their buttons are pretty good, at least in that specific regard. I think the frame data and stuff on them is not so great, but we'll talk about that later on. But in general, I think some characters might have some trouble getting around some of the bigger normals because they're so long range and they're slightly disjointed, which is not really that common for buttons this big to have disjoint like they do. So I do think that is a pretty big quality of the character. And to kind of go along with that, I think the character's air options are good as well, at least for the most part. They do not have a double jump, which I do think is a negative of the character, but they have an 8-way air dash they have access to. And this, of course, is going to give them all sorts of ways to get around anti-air attempts. It's going to give them ways to maybe get around zoning as well. And they have great air normals. Their JP is a very good normal for air-to-airing. Their JS is also a good normal for space control, especially when you pair it with their 8-way air dash. They can do air dash back JS, they can do air dash forward JS. It hits people crouching as well, which is great. They have stuff like JD, which is great for stalling your air momentum, which is another way that they can kind of get around anti-air attempts. So while they don't have a double jump, which is bad for some common situations, I think they have a lot of other strengths in the air, which is nice to have for a character like this because they don't have great movement speed and they're kind of big. So them having the air options, I think, is nice to kind of compensate for all of that. Now, the big thing about Bedman, I think, is that they're supposed to be kind of like I don't want to say set play per se, because I don't think they're necessarily going to be doing a lot of crazy mix-ups, but I think they have, at least situationally, very good block strings that they have access to. So this is just an example of a clip I found on Twitter from Daiji, showing some of the offensive potential that Bedman can do once you have the opponent in the corner. I think when they have air state and or meter at their disposal, their block strings are very good. They're very good at forcing a lot of chip damage, cranking up your wrist bar. They have a lot of guard crush situations, which are very nice for the character. There also is some mix-up options that I've seen. I'm not sure how good all of them are. They can combo off their throw, like you're seeing here. So I think offensively, at least in certain conditions, they seem very strong. Strong enough that, at minimum, I think just because of what they could do on offense when they get started optimally, it seems tough for the character to be, at minimum, bad, right? It seems like they have to be at least pretty decent just because of what they can do when they get their optimal condition going. And to kind of go along with that, like I said, they use meter really well. I think they use positive bonus incredibly well. This is an early concept I've seen posted of what they can do when they have positive bonus going. And having good positive loops is very, very nice to be able to close out rounds after getting a wall break. Unfortunately, something about this character that is a downside that I'll just mention now is that their error states that they get from doing their special moves, they don't actually carry over if you end up breaking the wall while having an error state, which is not necessarily the biggest problem, but it is a little bit of an inconvenience for the character. And I think the last main positive of the character is just that they have a pretty good fireball. Now, fireballs in general can be pretty risky in this game because they're counter hit recovery. They don't do a lot of damage on their own, obviously. They're more of getting you to a better situation. Bedman's fireball in particular is very good because it's just very fast. It has a little bit of tracking property to it. So if the opponent is maybe jumping or something like that, it'll kind of home in on them. The homing seems like it might be kind of a blessing and a curse because sometimes the homing just isn't very good. And then also on top of that, because they have the error state mechanic, it gives them access to the automatic follow-up, which is another homing fireball. Or you can just do it earlier or later by doing 214P or 214K, which is nice. So those are kind of the main positives of the character to me. Those are all pretty decent, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows for the Bed. Now, I mentioned that its normals are pretty good, but I mostly only mean in terms of the range and the hitboxes that they have, because one big issue for this character is that a lot of their normals are very minus on block and very minus on whiff. So one problem that Bedman has because of their frame data is a lot of their moves are so minus that characters with reversals, whether it be a meterless reversal or a super, they can just punish their moves on block with a reversal. So using their 2D, for example, their 2D I believe is minus 10. So if you have a reversal on deck, you can just punish it. The other problem with that is that they don't have good special cancel options either, because they have nothing that is gapless or safe on block. So if you do like 2D into Fireball, that is gapless point blank. You have to be literally right next to the opponent. But the Fireball itself is minus 11 on block. So if your opponent just hits like a slash button or something and is counter hit recovery, they're going to get a full combo if you do that. If you're any further away, for the case of like Soul's DP, it might be able to make the DP whiff or whatever. But if you're dealing with a super, right, like a Nago super, a Ram super, it's just going to blow through that. And this applies to a lot of their buttons, right? Like their 2S is also very minus on block. So it's just kind of a problem that they have. You know, even just beyond having a reversal, if your character has any type of good options that are fast enough that they can represent, after Bedman does something like 2K2D, they're punishable on block, and a lot of characters will have normals fast enough to reach them to punish them. And they don't really have a great way to deal with this because their cancel options, again, aren't very good. The best thing you have is the Fireball, which is not a very rewarding option, and if they just block it, it's minus 11 and counter hit safe. So that's definitely a big disadvantage because you don't want your block normals to be turning into you losing, right? That's one of the worst things you can have in a fighting game, is that all of your buttons start feeling like a big commitment because you're kind of putting yourself into an RPS situation that isn't even in your favor anyways. So while I said that their offense is good, like conditionally, if they get their optimal situation going, it seems very strong for them. I think they actually have trouble getting going as a character because the way that their neutral works, they don't actually have great conversions. A lot of the things that they do in neutral don't end up converting that well. Like their Far Slash doesn't really combo into anything, their 2S doesn't really combo into anything. Their 5H has less range than their S button, so doing just a simple Gatling won't combo. The best things that they have are like 2K2D, which I just said, you know, after you block 2D, it's kind of bad for Bedman. So while on hit, it can be very good. It goes right into Beyblade, which goes into pretty strong offense, I think. On block, you're putting yourself in a bad situation because its cancel options just aren't very good. Trouble converting, and trouble where it's not great on block unless it has 50 meter or an air state stocked up, which you're not always going to have access to. I also mentioned that it does have good air options between, you know, JS and JD and hover dash stuff, or 8-way air dash stuff. Those are all good, but something that's kind of a problem in this game to keep in mind is that most characters in this game have strong anti-airs. And in particular, a lot of those anti-airs are very rewarding, right? We all know Soul, like if Soul anti-airs you with 5k, you're getting put into a combo video. If you get anti-aired by like Ram 5p or Happy Chaos 5p, Nago 5p, any of the strong characters, or not even just strong characters, right? Even like Kai can anti-air you pretty rewardingly. It's a good option for Bedman, but it is high risk at the same time, which kind of leads into this nature that I'm starting to think Bedman might end up being a pretty unstable character, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking the character might end up as. You know, when the character is working out and they're doing their strong thing, they'll look pretty good. But there's going to be a lot of situations or a lot of matchups where they're going to struggle to get started. That's not like the best thing for a character, because usually you want to be consistent, right? Another issue they have as a character is that they are quite large, as you can see. And this means that them getting around things, especially when you consider the fact that they don't have good movement speed, their forward movement speed is not great, their back movement speed isn't good. They have trouble like getting out of situations, or even just jumping over fireballs or something like that. It'd be very difficult for them. They have 5-frame jump startup instead of 4-frame jump startup, so their jump is a little bit slower as well. And on top of that, they don't actually have above average health. Their health is actually quite average. They have no guts, which is unfortunate for them. So they're a heavyweight, which is good because it means some combos won't work on them or be harder to do. They don't actually get most of the benefits of being a heavyweight, which is, I think, particularly notable considering we're just mentioning how the character is kind of inconsistent, right? If your character is inconsistent, you would want them to have high health. That way, when situations don't go your way, it's not as punishing. But the fact that their health is just average is not great in combination with the problems that they have. The last problem with the character, I think, is that they do have a reversal super, which is like decently big. It hits kind of high, hits kind of far away, but it is very, very minus on block, and it's also slow startup, to the point where characters can actually meaty with like a close slash or a P button or something and block your reversal in time. That's pretty bad. You know, when your reversal doesn't work against meaties, it's obviously very easy to safe jump as well. It's still good for using against frame traps. Not having it on access or having access to it on wake up is kind of rough as well. So yeah, those are pretty much my main thoughts on the character initially. I think they're going to be pretty weird to develop because I think their matchups are going to vary quite heavily depending on the different tools that they have. And there's a lot that people still had to figure out both how to use the character and how to deal with. I see a lot of people doing a lot of air fireballs in neutral and stuff like that. Air Fireball actually has landing recovery all the way until the character touches the ground, so it's not as strong as it may initially seem. I could definitely see some things about the character feeling weaker later on once people lab them, but I can also see other things about the character feeling stronger once people lab them. So we'll see how they ultimately end up. I don't think they're like Doomer status. I see that going around. I don't think they're that bad or anything. I think they're a fine character with potential to be a good character. So we'll have to see how they ultimately develop. Of course, I'm curious to know what you guys think about Bedman. Have you been playing him? Do you think he's fun to play? What are your thoughts on like the character strength and all of that? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out trying to grow the YouTube, so I appreciate it. But yes, I am very curious to see what people develop with the bed.